Hello and welcome to another episode of The Scramble. I'm your host, Sarah Montes de Oca. Thank you for joining us. On today's show, we'll discuss the outrage over a recent Clorox ad on Twitter. We'll also discuss a bill that would allow Uber to finally become a business in Las Vegas. And finally, we'll dissect Hillary Clinton's announcement for the 2016 presidential election at issue, whether she will be able to overcome the series of scandals that have plagued her since days as Secretary of State. Before we dive into our topics, let's introduce our panel. First, we have Brittany Altamirano, a graduate student in Journalism and Media Studies. Karina Perez, a sophomore in Journalism and Media Studies. Joining us once again is Jason Hawley, a graduate student in Journalism and Media Studies, and David Sarabian, a senior in Political Science. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Clorox recently tweeted a mosaic photo created from new emojis released in the latest Apple iOS update. The tweet read, quote, "New emojis are all right, but where's the bleach?" Clorox was simply commenting on why bleach wasn't included among the hundreds of other household items that Apple had added to the list of emojis. After retracting the tweet, Clorox apologized, saying, quote, that it was meant to be about all the toilet, bathtub, and red wine emojis that could use a cleanup. Should Clorox have given and retracted the image even after clarifying its meaning? And have we reached peak outrage where we will find an excuse to be upset about almost anything? Do we relate just about everything to race? Who wants to start? Brittany, why don't we start with you?
I think we definitely are hypersensitive to the issue of race and race relations. It goes beyond, obviously, emojis and a lot of the things that are police brutality related and stuff that we've seen in the news and linking those things to each other. But I personally think that this went a little too far in terms of labeling it as racist when clearly what they meant was their product. Bleach, not standing for white, but bleach standing for the actual product itself. So I do think that we went a little far on that.
It just seems to me as just absolutely ridiculous in how much they stretched the imagination to make this a quote issue. If you see the picture itself, it's quite literally just a Clorox bottle. And the only colored things on there, any type of color, is a little glass of wine that they have as one of the emojis. And you've looked, and in some of the articles that you've seen about it, they've shown the pictures of the Twitter comments. And at first I was wondering, what on earth are they talking about? And I'm really disappointed in Clorox that they folded so easily to such stupid comments, when if you look at it, there are maybe 7 to 10 comments, and it seems that companies are so hypersensitive to being called racist, like we saw with Memories Pizza, that they will just completely backtrack from their position without even explaining or talking about what was at stake. And even the NAACP didn't mention anything about this. There was never any rights or representation group that commented about this at all. It was just some random people behind a cell phone or computer that commented and were able to get Clorox to change their behavior.
Karina, do you think Clorox should have retracted their tweet?
They should have, because I feel like if they didn't, then people would get more upset. Like the longer that they waited to take their comment back, the more upset people would be, and then they'd make it into a much bigger issue than it really was.
A much bigger issue than a Clorox bleach bottle?
Well, people are.
They stretched any possible site of racism as much as they could out of that. They weren't even talking about race. They weren't even talking about ethnicity.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they were, but it's just like people are so sensitive now that the fact that they actually thought that was racist, and if they hadn't taken it back, then people would have gotten more upset. They would have said, oh, they don't want to apologize. They don't want to say anything about it.
But wouldn't those people have actually stopped buying Clorox?
Some people
bleach?
would. If they took it this far, they probably would stop buying Clorox.
I just think it's just a bit of an inane idea to suggest that they should fall into what a few obviously odd-thinking people have about what's racist and what isn't racist. And it's people like that make comments like they have with Clorox that makes me wonder if they've even observed racism at all in their lives.
Jason, what do you think? Do you think it's a misunderstanding or?
I don't really care what it is, but I do know that it's more of a red herring from what the real issues of contemporary society are. I mean, think about this. If we're going to argue over about an emoji image on Twitter being racist or not, when it's not containing, when it has no images of people, then we're really kind of taking away from the real issues at hand. Okay, some of the congressional issues on the docket, or current policy changes, essentially, that are going to impact us much more than perhaps the more visceral reactions we may have to some trolls arguing that some benign image produced by Clorox is otherwise racist. So in that sense, it's totally irrelevant, essentially. And I think that it's really perhaps better to set that conversation aside and to look at perhaps the more important issues. But it is more or less an illustration of this idea that society does latch on to things which are more so charged with emotion as opposed to things which impact them, essentially, right? Such as policies looking at mass surveillance, or water distribution policies, or looking at the local level, like here in Las Vegas, right? How are we impacted by the drought? What's the state legislature passing in terms of that? Things of that nature. So it's a red herring, in short. So.
Okay, well, moving on to our next topic. A Nevada Senate committee has just approved a bill that would allow Uber to operate in Las Vegas. The bill includes an amendment requiring a 25-cent surcharge that would help pay for Nevada County's road construction. Uber, the car lift service, operated in Las Vegas for a short period of time before a judge shut them down for non-compliance, saying that, quote, Uber was wrongly seeking special treatment and trying to skirt laws designed to keep consumers safe. Will Uber supplement taxis by driving service to the outlying areas of Las Vegas that taxis don't normally go to? And will Uber finally be able to become an established business in the city of Las Vegas? David?
Well, I think hopefully there seem to be enough people gunning for Uber to be here in Las Vegas that it'll eventually come here. I don't know how many people have seen it on their Facebook feeds. I certainly have. There's the sign the petition to bring Uber to Las Vegas. And there's at least enough push congressionally with the state of Nevada going through the Judicial Committee here, and enough of a push with Uber at least trying to get people to sign a petition that Uber will eventually come back to Las Vegas. As far as the critics have said that they've tried to skirt around certain legal provisions, I think they most certainly have. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've added this 25-cent tax that will go on to supporting the roads and infrastructure here in Las Vegas.
So, I think we can look at Uber's infiltration of economies, particularly.
Infiltration?
Well, I mean, that's what it is, right? It's covert, essentially, and it's used by different mobile devices. We can look at it as the emergence of this new techno-libertarianism, which is becoming increasingly pervasive in our society. That is, everybody is really propagating this idea of individualism, hyper-individualism, and privatization of the market, essentially, in terms of even taxi services, right? So we're kind of taking things out of the hands of the state, we're putting it into private hands, that being Uber. Uber is a company, once you look at it closer, it's not necessarily a company that's that trustworthy. I mean, they do God View, for example, at company parties where they pull up literally a live view map showing where notable people are located at any given time of that day, right? So they can look at, where your most known celebrity is traveling, or whatever. They do that very often. And they're also a company that doesn't really value sort of the rights and the protections of their riders. So if the riders are raped or if something occurs, it's really all on them. So it does really kind of embody this general notion of individualism, of deregulation, which I think it can be quite dangerous when we look at it more closely.
Well, recently the FBI opened up an investigation into their practices, especially some of the ways that they have tried to convince taxi drivers that they should come over and work for Uber. Mm-hmm. There was even quite a few issues of Uber working against Lyft and having some of their people with Uber paid cell phones creating accounts on Lyft and then doing things like ordering a vehicle to pick them up, but never actually showing up there, so that it can discourage the Lyft drivers to come over to Uber. And it seems that a bit of their predatory practices are starting to come to an end as legislatures are starting to respond with rules.
Well, I mean, rules can be one thing, but look, I mean, when we talk about the private sector coming in and taking over a transportation mode, which that being the taxi service, which is otherwise highly regulated by the state.
Oh, certainly.
Then of course you're going to have issues, and we've already seen a number of those issues occur. Insurance issues, right?
Yeah.
Looking at, well, Uber says they're not a transportation company. Looking at this issue of passengers, what kind of danger are they in, and who's covering them? Who's going to help them out essentially? And this notion as well of the data, right? So you're traveling from point A to B. What is Uber doing with their data? One famous post that they did was, I forget the name of the post, but they retracted it from their blog, but it's on the Internet Archive if you want to find it. They basically went on to the Manhattan area and they basically did this analysis over a holiday weekend of who was having one-night stands. And so they did this pattern looking at who traveled from the bar to someone else's house or residence that evening. And they did this funny analysis. It wasn't funny, it was kind of scary and creepy analysis, which they thought was funny and interesting. But that kind of shows the practices that Uber is engaging in, which it's a black box company.
Well,
and
what do you think of them actually using Uber to really go into these urban areas that taxis don't normally go to here? I mean, could that potentially motivate taxi drivers to actually start going to these urban areas, or they have some competition now? So how is that going to affect it?
I mean, so if you could clarify what you mean, because to my knowledge, I'm not familiar with
suburban areas that the people call taxis to, and they never show up.
Yeah, a non-notable location that's off the strip, it's very difficult to get a taxi to show up to. There have been some times where I've called a taxi, let's say, to take me to the airport, and I called them a few hours in advance, and it had been 3 hours, 3 hours, and no response from the cab company whatsoever. And thankfully, I had a friend to take me. But this is more typical than not when it comes to cab companies, especially when you call them up and you're 2 miles off of the strip, and you ask for them to give you a ride, and then they say, oh, it'll take 45 minutes to get somebody to you there. And I'm thinking, I could walk in 40 minutes to the taxi stand where they've got a taxi right there at a local strip hotel.
Yeah, I mean, I think competition in that sense would probably be helpful in order to
certainly
spur, this idea that people are served equally and quickly, right, in these markets that are further away from the strip. But on the other hand, I think we have to be very careful and cautious. I mean, on the one hand, Uber is sexy because it's this kind of disruptive company, right? We hear this term disruption in Silicon Valley and the emerging tech. But
it's a startup.
It's a startup
Everybody
company.
Loves that term, startup these days.
But we have to be careful because Uber, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a data company. All right, they're taking your data about where you go, where you're going, and they can do whatever they want with that data. Only till the past, I think, perhaps 3 or 4 months, had they published a privacy policy about their practices with data, to which they argued they'd been adhering to that policy the entire time of operation, which is debatable.
Brittany, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Should Uber come to Las Vegas?
I'm just wondering what they're going to do with the practices that have taken place over, say, Craigslist or these other sort of sites that typically cars, different possessions get seized when somebody tries to solicit themselves as a mobile service other than a taxi cab. And so now you're having Uber drivers who are your regular Joe Schmo who are signing up on the internet, no background real checks and no face-to-face interviews, that kind of a thing. We don't know who we're getting in the car with. But at the same time, if you're willing to put yourself into that situation with this company that has, a presence throughout multiple countries and across states, that, okay, that's cool, but what are the legal implications of, what was in place versus what is in place with something so institutionalized here as the taxi service? And they have put so much effort into, yes, the safety regulations, the safety in terms of your passengers and keeping video cameras of what's going on. That these are kind of things that Uber's going to need to think about when they come into this market. Say they do come, these are kind of things that they're going to need to branch out and apply to their company. But I don't know what they're going to do now because it was so cut and dry before, and now it's a little bit wishy-washy.
What are your thoughts?
I think it's a good idea, but they do have a lot to like fix, like with all the safety and like who are their drivers and stuff like that. But I think it's just like it's a good idea, but they just need to fix everything just for the fact that like in those like the suburban areas you have like a lot of like people like not only on the strip do you have people drinking, but if you have people in suburban areas drinking, it'll be a much safer way to get someone home. But they do need to like fix everything that they've like the safety issues, like all of that was brought up before, like that all needs to like get fixed and like have more regulation, and then it'll be like a great thing.
All right, well, we're about to take a break, but stay with us and we'll be back shortly.
Oh, hey, bud. Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
With Gary and Todd?
Yeah?
I've been meaning to ask you, is there any drinking going on in this crowd?
No?
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't. I'd do anything to keep you safe.
Okay, I will.
I hope this is working.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Thanks for staying with us. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton formally announced her candidacy for the 2016 presidential elections. This will be Clinton's second attempt after losing to Barack Obama in the primaries in 2008. Hillary says, quote, "Every day Americans need a champion, and I want to be that champion." Sources say she is unlikely to face any tough competition from the Democratic Party, but Republican attacks will certainly escalate. Will Hillary Clinton be able to overcome the swath of scandals from Benghazi to her emails to the Clinton Foundation that have plagued her until now? Brittany, do you want to start? What do you think?
Well, I remember a few weeks back we talked about the email scandal, and we kind of tossed some ideas back and forth in terms of it relating to her legitimacy to run in the presidential election. I think a lot of the scandals are just scandals. I think that we can kind of chalk up a lot of what she. It's my turn. So we can kind of chalk those things up to just things that are publicity stunts and stuff like that, but won't necessarily hinder her presidency. What I think will hinder her presidential campaign is, and I hate to be the one to say this, but I'm not sure that all of the U.S. is ready for a woman president. And I don't know if we can necessarily state that all these things will hinder her when the larger issue at hand is a gender issue.
I don't know if it's a gender issue because I personally think the U.S. is ready for a female president, or one who identifies as a woman. But I think the broader issue here is across all of the candidates. This idea of the presidency in and of itself, politics, contemporary politics, has literally been sold out for capitalism. Democracy has been given up for capitalism, essentially, because when you can gerrymander, borders, right, for votes, and you can accept unlimited amounts of donation monies from companies that do not have to reveal themselves. We are entering a time when money controls reality, when interests of big corporations control the votes, essentially. They control the political interests. So really, it's a bigger picture, not just about Hillary Clinton being a female or being a president. It's about her upholding and sustaining the machine, not to use Rand Paul's words, but it literally is a machine, okay, that she'll be upholding. Just the same way that Barack Obama did, just the same way that President Bush did. As a matter of fact, people say, well, President Bush is a liberal, but if you're to look at his policies, he's not. For example, prosecutions or charges of espionage under the Espionage Act have been higher under Obama's administration than all previous administrations combined. Okay, that is, he has charged more people than all previous administrations combined during the past 7 or 8 years. Okay, so if Hillary Clinton were to be elected, my estimation would be that she would kind of just perpetuate this pattern that we've been experiencing thus far, among others. I don't really know if anyone would be a disruptive candidate, to be honest.
Did you mean Bush a liberal or Obama a liberal?
I meant that Obama, a liberal. People think that they thought he was a Democrat or that he's a liberal, that he would diverge from Bush's policies. All right, Bush passed the Patriot Act, okay, in 2001 after 9/11. All right, not only did Obama vote for it when he was a senator, but he actually magnified the policies essentially during his presidency. After his second term, when he was reelected, he magnified them even more. Okay, so really we just see this kind of big machine, or this I don't really know what to call it. It's just this thing, this blob of stuff that's going on in the presidency that's only going to continue unless somebody goes in and discontinues private donations that are unlimited from companies, okay, and gerrymandering.
So you think Hillary Clinton is just going to add to this blob that you say?
Well, if she wants to discontinue gerrymandering, if she wants to discontinue private donations, all right, by corporations to campaigns, then I think that would be great. But I don't think that she's for that. I don't think any candidate is for that, for myriad reasons. Okay, NPR did a study, or not a study, but a report a few years ago, and they actually looked at the return on investment for lobbying efforts, and it's like 2,500%, 2,500%. So it's a very efficient way to make a lot of money based off of little investment when you have lobbyists working for your interests. So that's why all these companies have lobbyists. That's why they're donating to these campaigns. That's why they've pushed to have the policies to influence the reality that's created for us, to which we contribute to by voting these people into office. So that's kind of the general framework I think that we're looking at.
Well, you've certainly covered a lot in your remarks. But some of the points that you touched on was with Hillary Clinton and the spending is, if I recall correctly, her campaign expects to raise and spend $2 billion.
Right.
And it's
the Koch brothers will donate $1 billion almost
easily
to whoever
various
is
people.
nominated. Yeah.
And,
whichever Republican candidate.
And you just are really getting this political machine, and that's going on. And one issue that's there is the super PACs, is that they're only required to spend, if I recall correctly, 10% of the money that they receive on political ads. And I think you're going to see it more in this election than especially the last one, is you're going to have all of these various super PACs, and a bunch of them are just going to do it to get rich, because they only need to spend 10% of their money on political ads. That means they can pocket the other 90%. And even though the dollar amounts are going to keep rising and rising and rising, that I think you're going to see a lot more economic entrepreneurs that are here just to suck the money that they can out of an election. And I think that's just going to increase the more elections.
Well, I mean, entrepreneurial endeavors, looking at that, I mean, you haven't seen a lot of entrepreneurs thus far because it's a bit of a short-term window you're looking at. Mm-hmm. And over the long term, investors are not willing to invest in a company that's not going to yield.
Well, this isn't a company, this is a super PAC.
Right, or a super PAC or something of that nature.
But you have a limit, there's a limited amount of money that you can donate to specific PACs from different organizations. So if you have 10 PACs that are going to say, we're going to put money towards Hillary Clinton, and you have a limit on how much you can donate, then you need to look for more PACs to give money to. And
I mean, my point is that they're trying to create a reality, right? The end game, the end goal is for somebody to get elected. That's why that's why they're affiliating with a super PAC. That's why super PACs are getting donations essentially. So if somebody can get elected, and if we can perpetuate this notion of gerrymandering, okay, and if we can keep the private donations alive and well, then we're going to continue looking at a reality and an economy that's anemic, and we're going to keep having increasing tuition costs. We're going to continue having a relatively dysfunctional healthcare system, although it has improved, among other issues. Okay, so
Karina, what do you think?
Like what they're talking about, or just Hillary Clinton?
It's Hillary Clinton, whatever you.
I think it'll be really interesting to see. I feel like it'll be really divided. Some people will be like, yes, we're ready for a woman president. Other people will just be like, no, we're not ready. I personally think we are, but I don't think Hillary Clinton's like the right person. Just I feel like she hasn't made such a big impact, especially under Obama. So it'll be really interesting to see how like people react, especially when you see who more of the Democratic candidates are.
Brittany, any closing remarks?
I just want to state for the record that I am okay with a woman president. I just, don't know if the U.S. as a whole, outside of heavily populated liberal cities, are ready for that.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
Well, I think that these attacks against Hillary have been dinging her, but I'm not sure it's enough, especially with the amount of money that they're going to be able to raise for her campaign, for her to not have a solid chance at winning.
To add to that as well, I think if we can, look, Hillary does have a legitimate chance, particularly given the amount of money that her campaign will have. Okay, but we have to look at her situation on the political spectrum, if anything, is center, if not a little right. Okay, all of the Democrats, essentially, if you look at them, all right, comparatively speaking to the prior administrations like Bush and others who were Republicans, we can arguably say that Democrats have moved to the center, if not a little bit to the right. So where are the true liberals? That's what I'm saying. Where has the Democratic Party gone? Where has the Republican Party gone? I mean, we've entered this very scary stage of the United States where we're seeing radical republicanism or radical right-wing movement, which again, it goes back to the Uber issue. It values the private sector, it values individualism, all right, privatization of everything basically.
But it very much values just big companies. They'll wave this flag of libertarianism, and then you have the Koch brothers come in, and they're funding all of these Tea Party candidates that they're just shoving money towards. And you have these Tea Party people who, on the ground, genuinely believe in what they believe. And yet their representation at the national level, especially in Congress, is just so bloated with these massive corporate interests, especially the Koch brothers.
Right. If you were to look at it between 2004 and now, it's increased over 100%.
Immensely.
Well, we'll see what Hillary Clinton keeps bringing to the table. That's all the time we have for today. Share your opinions and any ideas and topics you would like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at UNLV-TV. From all of us here at The Scramble, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.